Welcome to the Student Startup Podcast. We develop first-class students for first-class service. Student Startup is the internship for entrepreneurs, not just for future business owners, but for any student who wants to reject childish ways and spend their years as a student interning as an adult.
Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to this live webinar where we discuss applying entrepreneurial principles to all parts of life. I'm joined today by my good friend, Lisa Heron, who's going to help us discuss applying business principles to the important value-creating world of relationships. Lisa, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So as many of you know, Lisa wears many hats at Student Startup. She is newly appointed as a board member. She has led student cleaning. She is currently leading student entrepreneurs. She does a number of mentoring and programmatic things. And as we think about an important topic like relationships, I'm just thrilled to have Lisa on the phone to jam out on this conversation. So let's go ahead and dive into it, Lisa. As we think about applying business principles to all of life, what principles are we talking about? Are we talking like assistant principals or like Mr. Jones at the elementary school? Like what are we talking about here?
We're talking about our 7 win-win principles for business life. So the first one is take responsibility like an owner. And the second one, which we're going to focus a lot on tonight, is choosing partners wisely. Choose partners wisely. Build a trusted brand. Think long-term. Be hungry to add value. Be humble and seek wisdom. And be people smart and others focused.
Well, that's it, folks. We've read them. Let's go do them. See you next month. Oh, wait. Easier said than done. Am I right, Lisa?
That's right. We need some practical how-tos.
Not easy to do. So we're going to dive into a number of those. Let's start on the business side, right? So I remember walking into one of my first business classes in college, and my microeconomics teacher almost had this like, you guys have been lied to. You hear about all these benefits of business partnerships. Let me tell you the nitty gritty, what can go wrong in business partnerships. And one of the big themes from this class at Wichita State was that when you enter into a partnership, you assume all of their assets and all of the liabilities of your partner. So don't do it lightly. Think about it logically, seriously. You know, what will be the effects of going into business with this person? She gave a number of different, like, what could go wrong. And what's interesting is when Lisa and I were talking about this just yesterday, Lisa went through a similar list that she had found doing her research. So Lisa, do me a favor. As we think about business partnerships, what are a number of things to watch out for with business partnerships?
Well, one of the people that I have listened to a lot and has a lot of experience in this area talks about when you go into partnership, you always need to be thinking things through, filtering them through. What if one of the 7 evil Ds occurs? They all start with D, but those are things like if your partner gets into drugs and drugs are getting in the way of your business. If your partner is disinterested, he started out strong, but now he's just like, yeah, he's not really feeling it. What if there's a default? So that's where your partner just like, I'm out. That's a default where one person just walks away. Disability. If your partner gets disabled, what about that? You know, there's a lot of emotion and feeling and all the things that go along with that. So what if your partner gets disabled? What if there's a divorce? Divorce, as we know, is a really, really difficult thing. It's one of the worst times that in anyone's life. And so that can really affect your partnership. It can also affect the assets, the business, if, they're a married couple and stuff. And so a divorce can affect that as well, personally and business wise. And then death. If your partner dies, what happens to his part of the business? Where does it go? Who's responsible? So those are just the 7 evil Ds that I have heard talked about and needing to think through about. If you go into partnership, what if these things occur?
Lisa, this is so good. I don't know where we send our tuition checks, but this is sounding a lot like my college business classes. Again, first day in class, my economics professor, she tells the story of two people, something like they met in business school. They had shared values and they knew where they were going. It was the same direction. And one person was good at this and one person was good at that. And they went into business and did great things. One of the partners got married. And, you know how those marriages go. Somebody makes a lot of money and then the people that are interested in them changes a little bit, right? Not that we know anybody like that, Lisa, but that's sometimes how the world works.
Yeah.
Anyway, tragically, one of the partners tragically dies. Guess who is now a part owner in this lucrative business?
I'm going to guess it's the spouse.
Yeah, it's the spouse who this partner hadn't vetted, Let's say this is, Joe and John. John didn't ask Joe before he married, what's her name? He didn't vet her as a partner, but that's just how the world works. All right. So when you get married, the spouse of your business partner owns half of all your stuff. So that's a very real thing. A couple other things, Lisa, you mentioned. You talked about drugs. I just had a conversation last week with a mentor of mine who was involved in a court case. As a professional, he wasn't on trial. Don't worry about that. There was a business partner who had gotten so addicted to a specific drug. It wasn't something you snort or shoot. This was the drug of gambling. And this person got so hooked on this drug. This partner stole $800,000 from the business to fuel his addiction. These things happen. And something like a disability, I think about, Lisa, the story of a friend of yours who just got in the car with the wrong crowd. Maybe you can share that with us. These things do happen when you don't expect them.
Yeah. A young man friend of mine had a scholarship to play a sport at a university. As a senior in high school, got in the car with some people that were his friends. He was sitting in the front seat, and one of the kids in the back seat had a gun. And the gun accidentally discharged, and he is now a paraplegic in a wheelchair. And so, these things can happen, and it's very tragic.
No doubt. So that's a little bit of the, hey, here's what can happen, right? So a couple of things that you can do to mitigate some of those things. So it's like, hey, life happens. It will rain. It will storm. Let's make sure your foundation is good. So Lisa, as we focus on the business side of things for a second, what are some things that folks can do to protect themselves when they go into business partnerships?
Well, I think that one of the key things is to realize that a person can be a really fun person. A person could be a friend for a long time. You might have had loyalty. You might have history. You might be really excited. But when it comes to getting involved in a partnership, there are other things that you need to consider. So all of the students have been through the group projects at school. And there's usually someone who's like, A student, he's on top of everything. And then there's somebody who's like, awesome, I want to be on his group because then I don't have to do much. When we think of friendships with someone, it may not necessarily, those positive things may not necessarily translate into a business relationship. So if you've got a person who is just, he always brings the fun. Okay, how is that going to work when you're in a business situation and it's hot, it's hard, something more fun comes up? Is he still going to be there? And is he going to take equal ownership in the responsibility? Is he going to be dependable or not? These are questions, we all have to think about these things, but you think about other partnerships, such as like roommates, same thing. Somebody may be a lot of fun. You may really like them. You may have lots of history together, but you might not want to live with them if the way you live isn't really well aligned. You can really love someone and not be a great match depending on what partnership you're entering into and what the responsibilities, what the tethers are in those various partnerships. So I think that that's one of the things, is like asking yourself the right questions about the person you're thinking about going into partnership. It shouldn't be, is he fun? Do I like him? Is he nice? Will I be disloyal if I don't choose him? If I don't do this? Those aren't the questions that you need to be asking yourself. The questions you need to be asking yourself are, how will this person work in a business arrangement? And do I have enough confidence in him and his character, in his judgment? Does he think long term? Is he hungry to add value? Is he humble? Does he seek wisdom? Is he responsible? Is he going to think like an owner? All of those things are things that you want to think about when you're looking to go into a business partnership. And I've had students talk about those kinds of things. And it's just like, if you value your relationship, it's really important if you do value your friendship, because going into business with someone may really put a strain on the friendship, or may put a real strain, like being roommates with someone may put a real strain on your friendship. And so these are things that we don't like to think sometimes about the black and white of it, but we have to. We have to think like a business owner, which means that you do the math. It means that, I've heard it said, facts don't care about your feelings. My feelings, how I feel about someone, that's one element, but it's not the only element you want to consider when you're considering a partnership of any kind with any person.
Lisa, that's so good. And for you, this is not theoretical. You're coaching students regularly who are making these decisions. I think about a number of young men here in Wichita who started a power washing business together.
And this was exactly what I told them.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things I told them.
Well, it's interesting. The old saying is the quickest way to end a friendship is to loan them money or to go into business with them.
Uh-huh.
And so, one of my big questions is, oh my goodness, with all of these downsides, why would anybody want to go into partnership? And, the answer to that is because two are better than one. They get a better return for their labor. All of us don't have the same gifts. Lisa's gifted differently than I am. I could have done this podcast by myself and it wouldn't have been nearly as good. Same thing with Lisa. Two are better than one. And so to capture the most value, Lisa talked about it earlier, we want win-win business. We want everybody to be better off, not just today, but in the long term. And these principles that Lisa's talking about are so key. So Lisa, let's dive into a few practical things. Like, I remember one of the things that you mentioned to me is how important it is to write things down. Whether it's a formal contract with a notary or whether that's a gentleman's agreement, it's written down. Why is that important? And what are some other things that might be on that similar list?
Because you don't know what could happen and what could be coming down the pike that might affect. If you don't define your terms, it's just really easy to get sideways. So one of the things that, my husband was an attorney for all of his career, and he ended up dealing with the people that did not do that did not write things down. And it's not just for someone with a business like an adult with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's a really good life principle because when you write things down, it helps you be accountable to it. It also helps define some terms. So as you write it down and you give it to your partner, what you wrote, he may interpret differently than you meant it. And so it gives you a springboard from which to discuss different things that can happen. And how would you do this? And what would we do if this happened? Well, I don't know if we should do it that way. It really helps you hash those things out and be really clear. It's also when you're in the flush of excitement about starting a new business or doing anything new, you've got that passion and you're excited. And that's a really, really important part. But it's also really easy to forget or to overlook some things that do need to be written down so that you don't forget them. Because what so often can happen is that at the end of it, it's like, well, I thought, well, you said, well, I didn't say that. These are things that can result in the end of a relationship that you really value. So while it may sound kind of rigid to write things down, I like to think of it as a protection for something I truly value.
Yeah, you're so right, Lisa. It's almost a form of insurance. Like, hey, what will happen in the future? We don't know. We're going to buy a little bit of insurance through this contract, through writing this down. There's a couple other ways to do that. One is buying actual insurance. So if a partner makes a mistake, a lot of attorneys and physicians will have insurance for mistakes they may make. not only writing things down in an informal way, but also in a contractual way, as well as insurance. Another thing is most entrepreneurs would recommend forming an LLC. It's just a cleaner way. There's multiple people who are owners in the same corporation, limited liability company. And so there's a few ways to do that. S Corp, C Corp, LLC. No need to get into those specifics today. But those are a few practical things. But I really think the bigger lesson here is what Lisa talked about before, these character principles. There's this saying that Fred Koch used to say, one of the most successful business people in Kansas history. He would say, all the lawyers in Christendom can't make a crooked man hew a straight line. And so really who you go into business with is almost more important than how you go into business. And so Lisa's mentioned a few of these, but you want to make sure that you have shared values. Are these people humble or are they all about themselves? Do they have integrity? Are they respectful? Do they actually want to work hard and be successful, right? So values, write these down, folks. Values, number one. Vision, number two. All right. Do we want to go the same direction? Do we want to have a big company or small company? Do we want to meet our basic needs or do we want to go change the world? All right. And then the third one is, do you bring complementary things to the table? And this is where it's like, hey, no hard feelings. It's just not a win-win here. And we have to walk away from deals all the time in business. Man, I'd love to do business with you. I don't see a way right here because there's not a great win-win. The capabilities, what we have to bring to the table aren't a great match. And so we'll look for the next opportunity to do business. And if you do that in a gracious way, you'll have a partner who's excited to try something with you next time. Lisa, anything to add to that before we transition?
I don't think so. I think you nailed it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Is that just because you report to me, sort of?
Yeah.
It's weird because like I'm your boss, but then you're my boss because you're on the board.
Yeah.
So it's a little, we should probably write that down. All right. So let's just share another story from the news. All right. So as you think about, principles and values and good partnerships, isn't really that big of a deal. Well, let's ask one of the richest people in the world. Let's ask Jeff Bezos if this is really a big deal. Mr. Bezos would tell you, well, I had this one partnership that didn't turn out so well, and it cost me a little bit of money. That little bit of money happened to be $38 billion of him not holding up his end of the contract. So we're in the news right now. There's another big billionaire in the news, and that guy's name is Elon Musk. He says, hey, y'all, I'm going to go buy Twitter. $44 billion. I'm just going to pull that out of my back pocket here to go buy Twitter. $44 billion. All right. He gets into it. Part of the contract, though, is if you back out, you owe us just $1 billion. So no big deal. Just $1 billion. And you guys know how this went. He backs out and then he goes back in. And at this point, it sounds like he's going back in, but there's always downsides if you violate a contract. Let's go back to Mr. Bezos. The reason why Elon Musk is number one in the world in terms of wealth and Bezos is number two is because Bezos violated his contract, his partnership covenant with his wife with just a little fling, a little $38 billion fling. When his divorce happened, that was the settlement, $38 billion. It's a hard lesson learned. But what's interesting is many of you folks on the phone, you've studied the best business book out there. It's called the Book of Proverbs. And the Book of Proverbs warns about this. Proverbs 4, Proverbs 5, Proverbs 6. It says, hey, if you go down this dark path, you will lose all your money and have a very miserable life. And you experience that from time to time. So, Lisa, here's where I want to pass back to you here. Sometimes the most dangerous partnerships are actually the ones that you don't know you're entering into. Talk about what that may look like in real life. Beyond, marriage could be part, other relationships. Tell us what you've seen in that regard.
Well, one of them is the young man I was talking about. He did not realize he's entering into a partnership by getting into a car of his friends. In a sense, you do that when you get in a car with your friends and you guys are going to go out on a Friday night. You're entering into a partnership of sorts where you're relying on them and they may be relying on you. So thinking that through before you get in a situation is going to be really wise. I think that another example of partnerships where you might not be aware that you wouldn't think of it as a partnership, might be a roommate, like getting a room with someone, whether it's a dorm or an apartment or whatever, but that really is a partnership. And so you think about things like do you like to be awake at night? Do you like to be awake in the morning? Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? What are our jobs? If one of you is a drummer and the other of you is a nurse that works nights, those are partnerships and you do need to think that through as it is a partnership. So those are just a couple of them that come to mind. What about you? What are some of the partnerships? You mentioned this yesterday about some of the ones that you enter into. You're just not quite sure that it is a partnership, but it actually is.
Lisa, you're right. I think about a story of, I used to work at an entrepreneurship education company in my previous job. And one of our national winners, like one of the top entrepreneurs in the whole country, he had read all the books. He had done all of his stuff. He was a business wizard. And I almost think he should go back and sue his business teachers because they did not warn him of the most important step on your entrepreneurial journey. And that step is who you sleep with. Poor guy. He went through all of these things. He was on his track to be the most successful person in the world. Senior year of high school, girlfriend's pregnant, drops out of high school, and his life looks very different. Now, because of his character, because of his entrepreneurial spirit, he bounced back. He's doing much better now, but that was a serious barrier along his journey. Again, to pull back on Fred Koch, he used to say, now y'all, this is politically incorrect. You will not hear this in your business class. He says the most important decision you make is who you marry. That is the most important business decision that you make. And what we see these days is people aren't as into marriage. They're into pretend marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they will pretend. And what they will have is they will have multiple sexual, what do we call those, Lisa? Multiple sexual
partners. Yeah.
It's real talk. And those are partnerships. That's the reason why they call them sexual partners. It is not a small decision who you engage with in that matter. And you should take those very, very, very seriously. Lisa, speak to us a little bit on that level.
So, a lot of people have heard of Dave Ramsey. He is Financial Peace University. That's one of the things that he is known for. But he has a call-in show, and a lot of times people call in and they're engaged and they've bought a house together or they've moved in. And so he pushes back a little bit on them because what he says is, you're technically roommates according to the law. If you're not married, you're technically roommates. And if we look at the divorce statistics, depending on how you break those down, there's lots of different studies, lots of different numbers, but we know that you're up 45, 50%, depending on the age group, depending on a lot of those kinds of things. If the divorce rate is 45 to 50%, you know that moving in together is even higher than that. And back to your point about, like, even in high school, you think about partnerships that they don't really seem like a partnership. Like, you don't think of them like a partnership when you're just dating someone. But if you're having sex with someone, again, the risk of you developing an unplanned partnership is very, very high. You thought you were signing on for one thing, but what you ended up signing on for was something entirely different. And a lot of times, one of those partners bears a lot more of the responsibility than the other partner for the rest of her life or his life. Another thing that we know is that when you do have, the statistics are extremely, extremely clear on the fact that one of the biggest indicators of poverty has to do with having a child and being unmarried. Let's say you consider abortion. That has its own costs as well, too. And a lot of those costs are very hidden costs. And so no matter which one of those doors you choose, that partnership, that kind of a hidden partnership can result in some very, very significant consequences for you, for your partner, for a child, for your families. And so these are things that, again, we want to really take very seriously and think about partnerships that maybe are a little bit more hidden.
And friends, hear our heart here. You can tell in Lisa's voice, we care about you. We want you to have a flourishing, full, happy life.
Absolutely.
But these principles really matter. The partnerships you make. Are you going to think about today, or are you going to think about 10 years from now? That's really the definition of being an adult. Can you practice delayed gratification? Can you do what's smart in the long term and pass on some short-term pleasure? And one of the things that just really mortifies our team is how many teenagers, they've never heard this before. Yeah, it's like, we talked to a student. Has anybody told you that's a pretty risky thing you're engaged in? Oh no, I was told to wait until I was 16. Sorry, that's not how it works. Again, let's just speak purely financial. Statistically speaking, if you get married and stay married, you will be significantly more prosperous financially. To Lisa's point, if you have kids before you're married, you will be more likely to be divorced. You will be more likely to experience poverty. And it's a vicious cycle. So please take one for the team and don't pretend you're married. Prepare for marriage. It's a much better deal. Lisa, as we wrap this part up, what else would you add to that?
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking is, to your point about our hearts, like that is absolutely our heart. These things sound serious and there's lots of warnings in there, but there's a lot of wisdom in there because certain decisions, once you make certain decisions, like, I don't know if any of you heard of the really, really old TV show, Let's Make a Deal. And so there are like 3 doors and you could pick door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Once you chose a door, the other 2 are closed off to you. And so recognizing that the laws of gravity, the laws of relationships, the laws of partnerships, they apply to all of us. And there's some really, really great blessings and prosperity and fulfillment and richness that can be brought by our partnerships. But there can also be some incredibly great challenges, changing the trajectory of your life. And I want to speak to that for just a minute. Some of you may know that one of our 3 daughters has a significant disability. Again, these are, we were married and, you plan your life and you think, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. Things happen and you can be really, really wise and make really wise choices and seek counsel and seek wisdom and all of those things. But life still happens. And so, as we think about the hidden partnerships, like what we were talking about of, who you sleep with, whether you are married or not, you have a child with a disability, that is again, the statistics on divorce when there's a disability involved are astronomical. I mean, I think it may be above 80%, something like that, because it's incredibly hard on the individuals, on the relationships, on so many things. And so again, you are going to be happier and your life is going to be richer when you have chosen wise partners who will be able to weather some of the life that does happen, both good and those things that maybe you wouldn't choose.
Lisa, thank you for sharing that. I want to go a little bit deeper into that. In this conversation, we've focused largely on, what to watch out for. What's the risky business out there that we should be avoiding? Which again, public service announcement, y'all, those are real. But to Lisa's point, there are so many rich benefits of good partners, not only from a business perspective, but also from a family perspective and a relational perspective. I've experienced that myself. Lisa and I, both hit the jackpot with godly, high character, hardworking spouses. I know Lisa's husband, Mitch, he is a stud. And I just feel like I married the most wonderful woman in the world. And again, good partnerships, you're thankful for them in the good times, no doubt. Like right now, Adrian and I are a season of life with the cutest 2.5-year-old girl you would ever meet. I mean, our joy level, it is so fun.
It's so fun.
It's like, people say like college is the best time of your life. It's like, boy, not for us. It's like being married is so much better. And then having baby is like even better. And Belle's 2.5, and it is sweet time. But what we know for sure is that the storms will come. And when the storms come, that's when your partnership is really tested and you really see what it's made of. And I have just been so impressed. Lisa, I'll let you share some of the behind the scenes. I've been so impressed by the level of joy and partnership that Lisa and Mitch have had after how many years of marriage, Lisa?
38.
38. That's amazing. Lisa, I didn't ask you this question ahead of time, so this is going to be on the spot, but how did you do it? How have you guys done 38 years and you still like each other? Tell us about that. Especially overcoming some serious challenges, right?
I think and this is just going to sound like so, I don't know, like probably not very romantic, but one of the things that I think I have learned is that there are times that are so rich and so sweet, but there are times when you, at least, maybe this wasn't true of everyone, but it has been true for us that there are times where we not sure we really like that other person, right at the moment. But at those times, we're a team and we're committed to the team. Okay. And so I think that is one of those things, is that commitment that we both share. And the commitment to a team is another thing that I think that when you are considering a life partner, that understanding what their expectation of that commitment looks like. We talk about for better or for worse. Okay. Well, when it's worse, talk about what some of the worst things. So what does that mean? My husband has had to say, I don't like her very much, but I am committed to this relationship. So I think that's one of the things that I would say, but I truly would say that we were very well aligned in our views and our values and what was important to us. I think that those were a lot of the things. And I really did. I married a man of incredible character, more so than I even realized at the time. And so that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So I'm really thankful for that.
As you should be. What a cool deal. What a cool deal. So I'm sure we've got a lot of students saying, hey, that's what I want. That's what I want, and, I sure hope somebody comes along, who's as wonderful as Mitch or as wonderful as Andrea. What's your perspective on how do you find somebody like that?
I think that one of the terms that you used before really, really plays in here, and that's delayed gratification. And another thing we touched on that I think is really important is writing things down. And so identifying the qualities of the person, what you think you are looking for, and then stick to that. And if you do change it in the light of day. Don't change it in the heat of the emotion, but really think about things. I mean, we all think we want something and we adjust it over time. But I think that looking at qualities, what do I want, is really important. And so oftentimes, like when you're in high school and even some in college, you're thinking about having a good time and how he's really cute, or she's really fun, or she's got a good sense of humor. And those things are all important. But what are your long-term goals? And does that person, how will that person fit into those long-term goals? And so you're evaluating qualities, not just how they make you feel in a moment. Even though it's not like that doesn't matter. It does matter, but those are not the mirror filters that you should be looking through when you're looking at a lifetime partner.
I couldn't agree more. And again, this is a through line, like when you're looking for a business partner or a roommate or a marriage partner, or you're looking to join a fraternity at college, or a very real partnership that many people come across is, hey, come join my gang. You'll get protection. You'll have friends. You'll have belonging. Let's not worry about all these liabilities that are coming, which I want to get to here in a second, Lisa. But this idea of shared values, shared vision of where you're going, you bring different things to the table so that you can be a good team together. One of the things we talk about is the way you attract somebody like that is by becoming somebody like that. So somebody else that's humble and hardworking and has high integrity. They do what they say they're going to do. They're going to be attracted to somebody with those same characteristics. So many people, male or female, they may feel like they're helpless and they are just sitting back and waiting. But if you're going to take an entrepreneurial approach, you need to take responsibility for what you can take responsibility for. And that is first and foremost yourself. And so encourage you guys to lean in heavy on that.
I have kind of put it like this, and I really talked with my daughters about this a lot. Do not wait to be chosen. Go out and be the chooser. Don't wait to be the choosy. And if you kind of think about that in that kind of a framework, I think that you can see the difference of one is very proactive. What do I want in a partner? Rather than who's going to like me and what do I need to do to make him like me enough or like me more? Or what do I need to do to have her think I'm cool? Or what do I need to acquire so that she'll pay attention to me? Think about what qualities that you want in a person and then set out for that. So you're goal oriented in that, in the way you pick a partner or a roommate, thinking about the relationships that you're making, whether it is, if you're considering joining a fraternity, whether you're considering, maybe you're thinking about joining a gang. There are obviously pros to being in a gang. You have a sense of belonging, you have a sense of family, you have, there's a number of things like that. But there are also a lot of liabilities. If you think of it in terms of like a business, assets and liabilities, there are a lot of liabilities of that. And so when you look at any potential relationship, any potential partnership, you need to run it through some filters and some traps. And the more intense that partnership, the slower, the more you need to consider, the more things you need to think about, the more counsel you need to receive, because there's so much more riding on that partnership.
So Lisa, I want to lean into something you said there about seeking wise counsel, which takes a lot of humility to say, I don't know everything. I've got blind spots. As you think through, as the stakes get bigger, again, if you're doing a big transaction, a big acquisition of a company, you pay millions of dollars of fees in advisors and consultants to help you make a good decision. As you think about personal relational decisions, Lisa, what advice would you give us on where are we going to find some wisdom?
We're going to find that in people with a lot more life experience, people who've made their own mistakes and want to help you avoid those. People such as your parents. I mean, that's the first place. Your parents know you and your parents love you. So I think getting their input, asking them to speak into that part, not just your friends that are your peers.
Yeah. Typically when you're looking for wisdom, it's people who have demonstrated success in a certain area. So thank you for that, Lisa. As we sort of turn the corner here, I want to close with one specific principle we've talked about a lot here so far, and that is this long-term thinking. You may be thinking to yourself, students, man, this is intense. I'm only 14 years old. The decisions you make when you're 14 are actually more important than the decisions you make at 34 because they have so much longer to compound. Again, this is just how the world works. Let's talk about business. When you're thinking about money investments, there's a few different factors. What's your rate of return? How much do you put in? But typically the number one factor with investments is how long is this investment sitting there and growing? Typically the stock market doubles every 7 years or so. So if you start investing when you're 14, by the time you're 21, you've got a lot of money. By the time you're 28, it's double that. By the time you're 35, got a couple kids running around, you got a bunch of money in the bank. It's amazing. Even more so is this time value of good decisions. When you decide when you're 13 to skip out on the silliness, to actually be focused on developing yourself so that you can contribute. When you skip the silliness of high school, when you focus college on preparation for your life and your career, and you're able to get married and avoid so many of these traps, that sets you up for so much success. So encouraging you to start now is the biggest gift we can give. Lisa, anything to add to that?
Another thing I wanted to point back to was that when it comes to any kind of partnerships, hope is not a good strategy. What you hope will happen is not a good strategy for forming partnerships or alliances. That's another word. Or joining a team of people as I hope this will happen. I hope we'll make money. I hope he'll marry me. I hope it'll be fun. We need to take responsibility for our choices. We need to choose wisely. And it just goes back to that concept again of being proactive rather than just slipping into something. Going back to Proverbs again, there's a passage in Proverbs that talks about how the wise man sees the trouble coming down the road and he makes steps to avoid it. The foolish man sees the problems coming, but he just keeps on going. And so because we want flourishing for the students, we want them to make those wise choices. We want them to not just hope, but plan for things. And that takes some analysis and that takes some evaluation, maybe writing those things down, some of those things that we have been talking about.
Well, as we think about, again, partnerships, relationships, I want to share this is like the coolest partnership that you will ever be offered. It is the best deal you will ever take. And that is the partnership that God offers. God is asking, hey, come and follow me. There's a lot of, again, read the book of Proverbs. There's a lot of foolish people who say, hey, come to me. I've got the path to the good life. Come watch my TikTok channel. Join my club. Join my people. That path so often leads to death. I can think of a student who's right here in the middle of my mind as I'm thinking about it. A student who took his business partnership seriously, who took his school seriously. He was a young man that was on his way to big success, but a friendship ended in his death. He hopped in the car, his buddies went off racing, and he lost his life through the windshield of a car because of a partnership he didn't know was a partnership. It's a path of foolishness, and God is saying, choose the path of wisdom, of integrity, of saving sex until you're married, of walking with wise people so you will be wiser, and avoiding fools because they will suffer you harm. But here's where the deal gets really good. If we're honest, all of us have been a little bit foolish. I mean, Lisa's like crushing life. She's somebody I respect so much. And I guarantee you, if you took her to coffee, she'd be happy to tell you some of the foolish things she's done in her life. I would be happy to do the same. But here's the coolest thing about what God offers is he offers, we talk about assets and liabilities. He gives you all of his assets. Jesus walked the earth. He was fully wise. He made great decisions. He thought long-term. He was responsible. He was all the good things you would want. And on his report card, in a cosmic sense, was all A pluses. Those were his assets. The way it works in God's book is if you make one mistake, it's a pass or fail. One mistake, one act of rebellion gives you a failing grade. Whether you've got 100 failures or one failures, according to God, perfection is the standard. So check this out, right? My liabilities, which say all Fs, Jesus's assets, which say all A pluses. When you come into partnership with Jesus, when you become one with Christ, not through good behavior, not through church attendance, but through faith in Christ and following Jesus in repentance, when you enter into that partnership, you get all of Jesus's A pluses. He absorbs all your liabilities, and you become an heir to the riches and the glory and the honor of God himself. It's a pretty sweet deal. And certainly we want you to have a great, successful, super awesome life. But what does Jesus say? He says, what does it profit a man? What does it profit a woman if they gain the whole world and forfeit their own soul? It's not worth it. So we commend that to you. So Lisa, do this for me as we close. Let's think back through those business principles for all of life. And run through a couple of those as we close, and I'll give you the final word.
Okay. Take responsibility like an owner. Choose partners wisely. Build a trusted brand. Think long term. Be hungry to add value. Be humble and seek wisdom. And be people smart and others focused.
Well, friends, I'll guarantee you if you do that, you'll be glad you did. Lisa, thank you for giving us your time. If you want more of this, we're going to have our in-person meetup at Wichita State later this month. You can have some more time with Lisa, pick her brain. Thank you guys for joining, and keep creating value in all of life.
Thanks, Joe.